While diagnosis is a common term among practitioners, it holds a connotation of the doctor-patient consulting relationship. It's during the diagnosis and feedback phases that the consultant and the client prepare and explore a more thorough and nuanced view of the problem, a view that's been only partial to the client up to this point. Different interpretations of problems exist depending on job roles, organizational locations, individual experiences, and understanding. This can help consultants and clients attack causes of the problems rather than the symptoms. Diagnosis is not a conclusion to come into one day, but a set of preliminary beliefs about what is generally happening to be adopted in the organization's change. Practitioners often make the mistake of single-handedly shouldering the burden of diagnosis. Instead, diagnosis ideally would involve clients or even client teams in the process. The consultant must summarize and abstract key points from the data. The consultant will look for common themes in the data and organize them in a way that helps the client understand the problem. Interpreting means drawing conclusions that are supported by the data. The consultant's role is to present the facts as well as to facilitate understanding and implications of the interpretation. Almost all data gathering activities will produce a long list of issues. Selecting those that are most important and energizing will help the client to be motivated and focus on a narrow set of issues to be addressed. The consultant can help the client to see which issues may have higher impact or priority than others. The organizational development practitioner aims to reduce a large amount of data to a set of manageable patterns. It can be perplexing to decide where to begin and how to tackle such an endeavor. Data can be organized in any number of ways, and the interpretation and analysis of the data are often inseparable from the experience of the person doing the interpretation, the sorting, and patterning. A more realistic outcome would be for the practitioner to develop a set of data-based preliminary conclusions that lead to a useful conversation with a client who can ideally participate in developing appropriate action. Procedures for analyzing data are generally derived from two logical methods for reasoning data. An inductive process consists of reading and storing through raw data to develop the key themes from them. A deductive process of data analysis consists of using models or theories about organizations, organizational change, and human behavior to help sort and interpret the data. Both are common approaches, as is statistical analysis of surveys and questionnaires. One popular method of analyzing data is to use a diagnostic model. Particularly if a model has been used to develop the data gathering approach, such as a survey or interviews, using a model to analyze the data is a natural next step. Using a model has several benefits. It makes coding data easier. Models present a finite number of categories into which data can be sorted. It can help with data interpretation. The practitioner can notice when categories contain more or fewer comments, or can notice which aspects of the model are over or underemphasized. It can help to communicate with clients. Unlike lengthy theories or academic language, models are often graphic depictions that can be more easily understood. Many practitioners use their own models that they've developed from their own experience. Unlike deductive analysis, inductive analysis is done without a predetermined set of categories. That is, the data analyst determines what the categories will be. The categories can also be customized to the project, so more or fewer categories can be used depending on how the consultant wants to present the data. The data should be categorized into 4 areas: project planning, compensation and rewards, management, and tools as an example. A second categorization system could be used to be the focal position identified in the comment: project managers, managers, and team members as an example. Still a third method where financial systems, technology systems, HR processes, and management processes might be used. Any of these is an accurate categorization of comments. Ask yourself what the client would need to learn and to present the data in a different way. What do you see in the three ways of the same list in terms of its organization that might benefit the client? Does it accurately reflect the data, or does it make it look like one concern is more or less important than it deserves to be? For surveys or sophisticated analyses of themes, statistical analysis can be a powerful tool for data analysis. Statistical analysis is very common with employee engagement surveys as an example. Methods for conducting statistical tests are complex and compared to qualitative or quantitative analysis and probably necessary in fewer circumstances. Most OD practitioners should be familiar enough with basic statistical charts and descriptive statistics. For the statistical research-oriented practitioner, powerful statistic tests can be very persuasive in terms of diagnosing organizational issues. Too much statistical detail can lead the client to ask a number of questions that lead to additional statistical tests and thus permit the client to delay an action phase. The best approach may be to be judicious with the use of statistics, to include just enough to build a persuasive case without overwhelming the client with too much data. Include a small set of relevant data, simple enough for a non-expert to interpret, with visuals to condense the important facts. When the data are sorted into categories, the task remains to determine what conclusions can be drawn. The practitioner can ask a number of questions about the data, such as, what are the strengths and weaknesses? What's the nature of the problem? What are the contributing sources of the problem? And what is being done about the problem today? In this process, it's easy to subconsciously slip from the facts and data to inferences, including some inferences that might not be supported by the data. A conclusion that employees do not trust senior management can be drawn from various facts reported in interviews. Employees feel punished for taking risks, or they choose not to report bad information. Having the facts available to support the inference helps to bolster the likelihood that it's a reasonable interpretation, and it gives both clients and change agents more confidence in conclusions. One reason why it's easy to make dangerous slips to inferences not supported by data is that the practitioners may draw conclusions based on their own experience. There are many ways that practitioners can avoid this problem and develop more sound conclusions. One is to conduct an analysis multiple times in different ways. Perhaps the most obvious is to work through the interpretive process with the client. If multiple interpretations are possible, holding a dialogue with the client can clarify which of these is most reasonable. The consultant's role is about facilitating a learning process that allows the client to explore an alternative picture. With themes developed and conclusions drawn, the practitioner must consider what issues should be brought up to the client. Not all of them are relevant, not all can be addressed. Careful prioritization is necessary to avoid presenting management with a laundry list of problems, which may appear overwhelming in its totality. Isolate the truly significant problems and prepare summaries that describe their nature and extent. There's a useful set of features of energizing data, or those critical that, when met, are likely to energize the client towards action rather than deepening cynicism or frustration that the issues seem unresolvable. These include the following. Issues shared with the client should be relevant to the problem for which the consultant and client have contracted. It will build energy when the consultant presents issues that the client can change. The most useful data will describe current facts rather than using themes to judge, evaluate, point blame, or isolate individual contributions to problems. Not all the themes in the data can or should be discussed. Be sufficient and specific. Enough detail should be provided so that the client can consider specific actions to take. After data are analyzed, sorted, and selected, the practitioner shares these findings with the client. This can take the form of written feedback in terms of a report, a meeting, or likely both. During the transition from data to action, the consultant's presentation of the data can be put even in the most willing client at a crossroads that may be difficult and even personally painful. Feedback to the client, if it's invited, can be a sensitive process with high anxiety. To maximize the likelihood that the client will receive the feedback and be motivated to take action, the consultant must create an environment in which exploration of issues, learning, and action planning are possible. Feedback motivates action when it's inconsistent with what's already believed, so that it produces a level of discomfort and the recipient is prompted to take different actions to reach different results. For change to occur based on feedback, the feedback itself and the process must create energy. The practitioner's charge is to help create energy with the client and direct that energy to the most appropriate areas of change. Feedback should be seen as verifiable, but also unfinalized. At a feedback meeting, the client and consultant should discuss the data and using it as a foundation for dialogue. Organizational development practitioners should consider how feedback meetings can be set up for success before they begin. The practitioner should think carefully about the environment in which the meeting will be held and whether it's conducive to learning, exploration, and dialogue in a confidential setting. Find a quiet, private space to meet and try to eliminate distractions. Also, enough time should be dedicated to the meeting so that the consultant can review the data, details behind the data, and discuss actions or intervention. Some practitioners give an early copy of the feedback to the client. On the other hand, the client has the opportunity to review it beforehand and to be better prepared to accept particularly difficult feedback. On the other hand, action-oriented clients may be tempted to act hastily on the feedback before discussing the data with the practitioner. The practitioner alone can make this determination based on preference, experience, and knowledge of the client. The discussion in the feedback meeting presents several opportunities to increase or decrease client acceptance of the data. Here are a number of recommendations for managing the feedback session and presenting data. Encourage the client to accept and appreciate the organization's strengths. Ensure that the themes described in feedback reports provide enough detail to be accurately defined and useful. Quantitative data can be illustrative in terms of trends and how widespread agreement is across the organization, but they can also provide too much detail for clients. Using non-evaluative, descriptive language, such as employees mentioned that the decision-making on the executive team seemed slow, will make sure that feedback is more likely to be accepted and acted upon. The practitioner may assume that the client will be angry, hurt, or embarrassed. Consequently, the practitioner makes assumptions about the client's feelings instead of focusing on the facts. However painful it may be for the consultant to say or for the client to hear, it's necessary to share. Avoid minimizing feedback in order to create a harmonious relationship. Doing so can water down the significance of the message and encourage the client not to take it seriously. You've likely encountered the fact that people resist change and no one seems to like it. Organizational change efforts often run into some form of human resistance, and the causes often include self-interest, misunderstanding, a lack of trust, and low tolerance for change. Resistance is commonly seen as a major barrier between the change agent and the successful implementation of the change, manifested in behaviors such as pushback, criticism, or not responding to requests in a timely manner. Managers and change agents strategize about the best ways to succeed in the face of opposition and search for the approaches, activities, and strategies that will help get employees to drop their resistance and embrace the change. The underlying view we have of resistance may not be the most helpful in our work with clients and their organizations. The phrase overcoming resistance to change suggests that the source of the problem is solely within subordinates. Resistance is seen as existing only in lower-level employees, and it's almost universally seen as negative. A more nuanced view of resistance suggests that reactions to change are not easily sorted into buckets of for and against. Reactions to change are better seen as a mix of beliefs, emotions, and behaviors, each of which can vary on a scale. There are 3 ways OD practitioners should rethink our model of resistance and take different actions as a result of this shift. We should remember that resistance is a label we apply based on our own interpretation. Organizational members may ask questions, share opinions, and otherwise act in ways that may be interpreted by a change agent as resistance. As change agents, we may be contributing to the very resistance that we're trying to avoid through misrepresentation or inauthentic behavior. We should recognize that resistance can be a useful resource to us in our change projects. Resistance can clarify purpose and can test that the right problem is being solved. Resistance can keep change active in organizations' conversation. Resistance can enhance the quality of the change and its implementation. Resistance can provide additional data about how employees feel about past change attempts and the organization itself. When we label change recipients as resistance and ignore their input, we fail to use it for the benefit of the change. The diagnostic process can surface negative feelings about change that the client may be unable or unwilling to address. A client's resistance to data and to taking action is a natural part of the process and is commonly expressed in feedback settings. There are a number of ways in which it might be expressed by clients. The client continually asks for more data, more descriptions, and more information. The client spends most of the meeting talking, providing history, background, and commentary not only on the immediate situation, but on tangential issues as well. Resistance is expressed as a complaint about not having enough time to complete the project, to gather data, to meet and discuss the diagnosis and feedback, or plan the intervention. The client complains that the solutions are not practical or feasible in this group, this division, this company, the industry, and so on. The client accepts the feedback with agreement, nodding that makes perfect sense. The client seems to be avoiding the discomfort that can arise from being confronted with new information. Direct attack is a clear form of resistance when the client expresses anger, frustration, and irritation through a raised voice and angry words. Much like a desire for more information, the client wants another explanation, expressed in a different way. The client remains silent during the entire presentation, and the consultant may be tempted to keep pressing forward until the client speaks up. The client asks about underlying theory, perhaps desiring models or articles that apply to this situation. The client wants to blame others, often as a group, stating what they should be doing or what they don't understand. Each of these expressions of resistance may at its heart be a desire to avoid, downplay, redirect, invalidate, or delay taking action. The diagnosis and feedback phase of the organizational development process provide a number of ethical dilemmas. First among them is the possibility of using data in the feedback meeting in a manner that violates the anonymity of participants. In the data analysis phase, the practitioner faces the dilemma of interpreting data in a way that does not reflect their own choices of issues. In the feedback meeting, the greatest ethical dilemma occurs when the consultant chooses to collude with the client by avoiding or minimizing difficult feedback. Most consultants do not desire to intentionally cause emotional distress of their clients. When they discover that organizational members find their manager incompetent or aloof, the consultant may be reluctant to address it. It is true that the consultant can face some challenging conversations, but the clients have the right to all of the information.